We are here. We are late. Judge Dan, unbelievable. No, it was actually it was my fault. Technical gaffe. The Cofield mastery of technology not always up to snuff. So we got a lot to get into, fellas. And Dan was saying right before we came on, he's like, "Yeah, it's getting kind of crazy down there in Vegas." Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. It's been kind of crazy. I did a whole rant today. We don't have to do it again, but on the Henry Ruggs thing, I did it on the show, like about 5 minutes worth. I was just like, yeah, you know what? It's another one of those cases. I'm tired of Vegas being bashed, like, as if Vegas is what happened to Henry Ruggs. Like, Henry Ruggs happened to Henry Ruggs. So this ain't our fault. The city does have a lot of temptation, but as we get more and more details, I mean, this could have happened anywhere. And, I mean, in fact, it sounds like it started, or a good portion of it started, Dan, at Top Golf down near the Strip. And I already asked Justin this on the air, but, immediately people are like, hey, rumors of like 18 shots being served and, liquor was flowing. Is Top Golf in trouble, legally in trouble for sending Ruggs out there on the road?
Well, that's any establishment that overserves. They can be in trouble. Absolutely. Now,
Not in
uh,
Nevada.
oh, really?
Yep, no
Okay.
dram shop liability here. So, I
Oh,
mean, as you could figure, right? If there's going to be a place that's a holdout on dram shop liability, it's going to be the
okay.
state of Nevada. You
Oh,
guys have
okay.
that in Colorado?
I believe so.
Hmm.
I haven't had a case with it, but as a general principle, if you overserve, you can be liable.
Hmm.
So, I haven't run.
I was going to say, going back on my comments about like, hey, it's not Vegas's fault. I mean, is it? Like, are we a bad city because, we don't have bartenders being responsible for people over drinking?
I don't think
Um,
that there's
well,
any.
well, I
Go
mean,
ahead,
but
Dan.
but well, I was going to say, think about Vegas though. Vegas, where are you drinking? As general, I mean, in general, you're drinking on the strip. You're drinking in strip clubs. When I think of Vegas, I in general don't think a lot about people driving, right? Like when I go to Vegas, I don't drive, right? Um, so maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong angle, but I don't think of it that way. Like generally, maybe locals it's an issue, but generally, professional athletes are not your biggest problem when it comes to this. It's so I don't know if
Looking at
that's
it from the
why
wrong
angle, but I don't think of it that way. Like generally,
angle.
am
Maybe
I?
locals, it's an issue.
I'm having a. I'm repeating to myself here.
You're good. Keep going.
No,
Yeah.
it's
So
just that good, Dan.
yes, I know. I can't get enough of myself. I love me some me, to quote the great Dan Jacobs. But I don't know if that's why you guys are like that. But it's generally people hanging out on the strip. They're walking around, or they're piling into limos, or they're doing whatever they got to do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any statistical data that would suggest that our civil liability rule on dram shop liability has any statistical significance to severity or frequency in DUIs or car crashes. So, I mean, I'm not saying the link's not there, but I'm saying it. We haven't seen any of it. But even if we did, I think that the that the resort's lobby is so strong that it would just never change. Because don't forget, I mean, dram shop liability, server liability wouldn't just be limited to I serve you too much, you go in a car and you drive drunk and you hit and hurt or kill somebody, but the liability would go to drunk guy leaves the club, goes and gets in a fight, beats somebody to a bloody pulp, and they're going to say you overserved, or leaves a show and trips and falls, or there could be endless scenarios in which a casino or an establishment within a casino could be held responsible if you extended that liability here. And I mean, it just brings to mind, I know this to be the case in like Utah and Colorado, it is all but impossible to sue, say, a ski resort when you rent skis for improperly hooking them up. not setting the bindings right or anything like that, because it's too big of an economic driver. They have to protect the ski resorts, and here we got to protect the hotels, casinos, and resorts. And I just don't see the law changing anytime soon.
Oh, and it's also, I don't know about you, Justin, but it's kind of a matter of when I was going through law school, it was like there's something just feels wrong about that. When you're learning that principle in law school, you're like, that seems wrong. Like, why are you holding an establishment liable for something way so far down removed because somebody wants to go into a bar and get drunk, and potentially a bartender or the owner of a bar, the owner of a small bar, now has to worry about staying in business because, or now it's on the bartender, um, maybe getting fired or something like that because they now have to, in practice, right? Think about this in practice. It's their job. And, people are going to a bar to drink and to get drunk, right? But, oh, how drunk am I supposed to allow them to get and decide what's going to happen once they leave the bar? And they're really in practice going to cut off this patron. Like, really, what are they supposed to do? I mean, it just, when you learn that principle, you're like, man, this doesn't feel right. Like, what happened to personal responsibility? Why isn't it this person's responsibility to stop drinking when they're supposed to? So that practice, that principle of law never seemed right. So
Right.
good on Nevada for it. Now, if somebody's like, passing out, should you be serving them? That, obviously a bartender, does a bartender need a law to stop them from doing that? I would hope they wouldn't.
Right. I've seen plenty of bartenders in Nevada cut people off, and a lot of it might be, for convenience, so they don't have to deal with a drunk. But
Right.
I've seen it happen lots of times, and unfortunately, almost every time it turns into, not, it doesn't turn physical, but it's always a brouhaha, at least a conversation where it gets real uncomfortable for the bartender and bartenders, and people have to jump in and kind of take care of business. So I wanted to ask you, we'll get Justin back on here in a second. Remind me on the what was the latest drunk driving incident that basically got tossed with the Broncos?
Oh yeah, Melvin Gordon,
Right.
and that was because the cop was, he sounded like a, he was basically trying to sell Melvin Gordon on his waiving his constitutional rights. Like, come on, buddy, just do this for me. This will just be between you and I, and just all sorts of shady stuff, and basically coerced him into doing. I don't know if it was roadsides. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but I mean, it was sickening listening to the body cam stuff, and then they were also, I think they were hiding body cam footage. I mean, all sorts of constitutional violations in that case, which some people were saying, oh, I got off on a technicality. Well, if you think cops trampling on your constitutional rights is a quote technicality, I guess, but no, I mean, there were serious constitutional violations in that case where, the cops were coercing, Melvin Gordon into doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. And so all the evidence of that was they could have used to incriminate him would have been suppressed. So there was no way they were going to get a conviction on him. And so they had to throw it out, and he walked.
So I wanted to ask you just to, just bring up some previous, potential drunk driving cases. And I rolled through the worst of the worst with Justin today on the air. In the NFL, in the history of the NFL, two of the most known were back in 2009 with Dante Stallworth. It was a DUI resulting in a death. He wound up getting community service and probation. He served, I think, 24 days in jail. That was it. There was
well,
Leonard
but there
Little.
was but there was a lot of mitigating circumstances there.
Yeah,
in that one,
there was Leonard Little, who wound up pleading guilty. He had killed a woman in a drunk driving accident. And by the way, Stallworth got 16 games from the NFL. Leonard Little in 99, 98 got 8 games. Little wound up getting, again, probation and lots of community service. And Justin, you pointed out today, while we all, a lot of people are like, oh, of course, it's going to be a slap on the wrist. He'll plea out. He'll be back in the NFL in a couple of years. Nevada is a little bit different, as a lot of states are getting stronger and stronger in really severe cases like this.
Yeah, mandatory 2 to 20. So no more than 20, mandatory at least 2 years served. The only exception to that is if there is some difficulty or problems with attempting to prosecute the case, something with the evidence where a DA comes before the judge, says, listen, I entered a plea deal for under 2 years because I don't have this piece of evidence that I think I need to really fairly prosecute the case and ensure a victory. But I don't see that here. We actually have some extenuating circumstances to make it that I would think it would be more likely that he's not going to get the minimum. That is reckless driving, the firearm, and in Nevada now, they passed this law last legislative session, or I'm sorry, 2 legislative sessions ago. It's a law called Marsy's Law. I don't know if it's made its way into Colorado yet, but it's backed by a billionaire who lost his kid and was appalled that in court systems, the victims' families did not have a right to speak as a matter of law, and spent the next dozen years going around to each state to ensure that it was written into statute that the victim or the victim's family have a right to be notified of court hearings and at certain junctions have a right to be heard. And so who knows, what the victim's family may say here. That could cut both ways. If Ruggs was able to sort of reach a civil settlement, maybe they say something favorable, probably not. But we have reckless driving, we've got the firearm charge, and we have the circumstances, if the family's going to speak, about the dog also dying in the wreck. That's not of legal significance from a statutory standpoint, but it would go to victim impact and victim impact statements. And so, I talked to a couple of people around town, like I said on the air, my buddy Josh Tomchek, who's, for my 2 cents, best criminal attorney in town. He said if he was a gambling man, he would say 6 to 15 is what the sentence will be.
Years?
6 to 15, yeah, minimum 6, no more than 15. Parole eligible at 6.
Yeah, and I just took a quick look at it. My guess would be, and by the way, Brady, yes, I would love to talk about at the tail end of this, the Broncos Halloween story if we have time, but the Halloween party. The only and I think that in Denver we have one guy. His name is Harvey Steinberg, and he's a miracle worker. He's the miracle attorney that gets the Broncos off. And I think you guys have 2 that Chesnoff or something.
He's been retained. He's Ruggs' attorney.
Yeah, right. The only kind of attack, and I wanted to ask Justin about this because you do products liability, I think. The only line of defense I see at all is approximate cause, because they have to. If they could, the only way they could wiggle this, and I don't even see this. This is a Hail Mary. Would be there's some evidence. Now he's driving a little Corvette, right? Now clear this up for me, because it said it was a Corvette Stingray. Is there a new model? Like, was he driving a new Corvette?
That's that new model of the Corvette, the one that looks
when
almost
I
like
think
a
of
Lotus.
Okay, like when I think of a Stingray, I think of something from the 60s. So there's a new Stingray. Okay.
Right, I think there's different trims with Corvettes, and I'm guessing this one, I'll look it up, is max horsepower and 12 cylinders. And I was reading something about 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. So we've been talking a bunch here in Vegas about that stretch of Rainbow, and if he, from the previous light, could actually get to 156 miles an hour that quickly. And
I'm assuming that I believe, like from the Tiger Woods case, I believe, and maybe Justin knows, I think that those cars have like a quote black box type thing.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So they have the info on that. So they have to show, to get that conviction, that the cause. He was the cause. And one of the arguments might be, well, he's driving a little Corvette. And yes, of course, the speed, that's devastating. But his little Corvette, they didn't die. They weren't seriously injured. But she was trapped in her car. That some other guy was trying to get her out. And was her car, her vehicle, was that the cause? Was that the proximate cause? Was it defective in some way? Did it stop her from getting out? She was in a RAV4 or something like that. If her attorneys can go to work on that, or excuse me, his attorneys go to work on her vehicle and say, hey, yes, it was horrible, but she should have not died, but because she couldn't get out of her car. Like she was awake, she was screaming, she was trapped in her vehicle because of the design of the vehicle. The little Corvette, everybody was fine, and this RAV4 was defective. Like there was no reason she shouldn't have been able to get out and survive. So that would be, I'm assuming, going to be the way they attack that charge. And if they can be effective enough in that, that's the path to maybe a plea, to maybe out of the non-probation eligible plea deal, or charge. And that, I don't think he's going to get that, but I think my guess would be that's how his attorneys are going to go to work on that defense.
Yeah, I think that's a Hail Mary, like you said. But I don't practice criminal. I'm relying on my buddy here, and he's saying if they are confident on the 0.161, and that's what the blood draw was, and it was consistent between the two draws, that he thinks they're going to have to plea the DUI charge. That they're not going to be able to get out of that. And the DUI resulted in the death. I think that sort of intervening cause of a product's liability.
Well, no, that's an element. It is an element. The element of the criminal charge is that's an element the prosecution has to prove beyond reasonable doubt. Is it caused substantial bodily injury or the death? I mean, that's an element they have to prove. But the product's liability is what I'm saying is, from your perspective, the car, right? That's what they're going to attack, because they're going to say, why did she die when the Corvette was fine? People in the Corvette were fine, and the RAV4, she's sitting there screaming for her life, alive. She's alive. The impact didn't kill her, right? She died because she was stuck in the car. That's the element that I would be attacking from the defense side. Like, she was alive. The impact didn't kill her. The crash didn't kill her. The 156 mile or the 126 miles an hour impact did not kill her. She died because she's trapped, because her vehicle left her in a death trap, was a death trap. That's the element that the prosecution has to prove. And, that would be their bar to overcome. It's an element they have to prove. And that would be their only way out of it, I would see.
Yeah, I'm I'm not buying that one. I mean, I don't think you're buying that either. You're just
I'm not, but that's what you
yeah. You got to try to say something, right? I mean, you got to try to say something. But we've had a pretty recent high profile case here that was somewhat similar. Now the gentleman is a very well-to-do gentleman here who, it was a single car accident, and he killed his passengers, but he had 2 prior DUIs, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I believe he had 2 prior DUIs, and he was sentenced to 8 to 20. And so I think that we're going to see a situation in which they're going for something quite similar, and I think we'll be in the, like, I'm going to rely on Josh here.
So let me ask you this: this criminal case gets resolved, right? He goes to jail for 6 years.
Yeah.
Then her parents come to Battleborn
and
say, my daughter was burned alive because she couldn't get out of her vehicle. She was alive. The witness said she was screaming for help. We want you to help us go after the, I don't know, Toyota. You wouldn't listen to the claim?
I mean, I'm listening to any claim, but I mean, as I understand this accident, right? She's hit on the side, so she's in the more vulnerable spot. The car flips on its side and goes for 500 feet, and so she's stuck on the side in a damaged vehicle. And I mean, why it catches into flames or the catalyst for that, I'm not sure. But I mean, I'll listen to any claim, but I highly doubt that I would take a case like that. I mean, nobody's claiming these cars are bulletproof. Nobody's claiming that they are accident proof. The jaws of life exist for a reason. They were invented for a reason. You know, this isn't the first one in which a person was trapped in a vehicle after a serious accident, and it's certainly not going to be the last, unfortunately. I don't think that perfect car can be made. And I guess if maybe it's the Cybertruck, maybe when that's out, then we'll know. But I think that would be a really tough one to sell. Now, the argument that maybe would give me pause is the car shouldn't have caught on fire. I don't know enough about the facts of this case as to why that car caught on fire or the circumstances that made that happen. So, if we had some evidence that we can get an expert in there to talk about that, to analyze it and make an opinion that it should not have happened that way, and that if the Toyota was manufactured in the way it should have been manufactured, it would not have caught fire. Well, then I'm listening.
All right. Listener Brady was just sending some pictures on Twitter of what he thinks was Ruggs' car on Rainbow. So for locals who were asking, why would Ruggs be at Rainbow and Trop and Rainbow and Spring Valley Parkway at 3:40 in the morning? Because that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, where does he live? Like, does he live in Spanish Trails? Like, does he live somewhere in the west of Rainbow, DI, Sahara, Charleston area? It turns out he actually does live right near Rainbow and Charleston off of Del Rey, which I believe is just past Okie. So, yeah, you would have seen him on Rainbow all the time. I drive Rainbow almost every day in some form or fashion, and I never saw his car. And, I never saw anyone driving in excess of like 100 miles an hour. That's a late night you could do it, and it's still very dangerous. But yeah, during the day or evening, it'd be crazy to drive that fast. So, but apparently this was something he did because I saw one of the British papers last night had a video of him driving like a lunatic. I heard some stories today about him driving pretty freaking aggressive around the Raiders facility. So, which kind of begs the question. When someone's driving like that, often that reckless on surface streets, does anyone step up and go, bro, calm down, man? You got this great car. Calm it down. So, and that's not a legal question. It's just, basically, hey, what do you do in these cases? Do you tell your friends, cut it out? Anyone?
Oh, the youthful hubris that I love, right? I mean, he seemed like, I mean, from that exchange with his girlfriend, he seemed to get a kick out of it. He
Right.
seemed to get a kick out of people telling him no on that stuff. He got a little rush out of it. So I mean, the story was that his best friend was, he was supposedly wrecked by the fact that his friend was killed in a car accident, and that didn't seem to change his mind at all. So I don't know. J.R. Smith. Uh, so here were the circumstances with J.R. Smith. I mean, I don't think this surprises anybody, but J.R. Smith was not at a stop sign. He was behind somebody at a stop sign, a four-way stop, decided the laws don't apply to me. And so I'm just going to race around the guy who's stopped lawfully at the stop sign, slams into an intersection, and his best friend dies. You think that might give that guy some pause, J.R. Smith? No, he's busted all over town when he's a Denver Nugget, breaking all sorts of laws, this and that, no license, this and that. He could care less. I don't. Certain people, they don't care. So I don't know. His best friend died. He was holding up, what was he holding up, 3 fingers or something like that at Raiders games all the time. But at the same time, apparently he got a thrill out of scaring his girlfriend, and he loved to race around town in a Stingray.
Before we can get to Rodgers here in a second. Any legal questions on Ruggs that we haven't discussed? Anyone asks or anyone wants to ask?
I think you said, well, in the email, or somebody had posed, can the Raiders get in trouble for cutting him? I don't see much liability there. I think he's got a lot bigger issues. I wouldn't be worried if I were the Raiders. I think he's pretty much covered under the clauses in his contract that prohibit him from doing bad things. But I'll let Justin address that.
I mean, they don't have to give a reason to cut somebody. I mean, they can cut somebody for any reason that they want. And I think the only way that it would create any cause of action is if it was discriminatory based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or otherwise. Now, would he have a claim if, let's say, Derek Carr had done the same thing 2 years ago and he wasn't cut, and now this happens and he is cut, and his allegation is you stick it out with the white players, but you don't stick it out with the black players? Could he have a discriminatory practices cause of action? Yeah.
Well,
maybe.
but here's sorry.
Yeah,
the question here is, though, they're not gonna pay his guarantee.
No, of course not.
Well, but I mean, in the NFL, you can cut somebody whenever you want, but
Right.
they get their guaranteed money. Here, they're going to void the contract.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Gemma says, is $150K bond normal for this situation?
I would expect that that's probably a little higher than normal, but I do remember Gregson's was $500,000, if memory serves me right. So, 6 figures seems about right.
What about the question about civil suit in Vegas?
Yeah, slam dunk. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that you're looking at is you hope that he carried good insurance. You'd say, "Oh, I don't need to worry about it. He's a millionaire." Who knows? Who knows how he's leveraged? And now his income ability went from millions to zero. And he's 22 years old, and maybe he didn't make wise decisions about insurance coverage and umbrella insurance to cover a big loss. And so then you're waiting in line with everybody else, all the other creditors and claimants. I don't know anything about his financial condition. I'm just completely making assumptions based on the fact that he's a 22-year-old millionaire. And typically speaking, professional athletes aren't super great about saving money and making smart financial decisions early on in their career. But absolutely, there's civil liability. You don't need to wait for the criminal process to play itself out. In fact, a lot of times attorneys will try to counsel the victim's family to wait till the criminal process plays it out, because if there's a plea deal, then it's a slam dunk. The civil case is already a slam dunk. I would get involved now, start communicating with the DA now, so that if there's any sort of restitution as a part of any plea deal, that you get that put in there and you get that considered. I wouldn't expect that in this type of charge, in this type of case, that restitution would be a part of it. But you're definitely not going to get it if you're not a part of the conversation and you don't have a seat at the table. Generally speaking, the DAs don't love us civil attorneys getting involved in their world. But if we help them, if we help them find, say, witnesses or family members, and help coordinate interviews, as it's been my experience that they're going to be helpful likewise on the topic of restitution. And restitution's big because, let's say, Ruggs is over leveraged and under liquid and files bankruptcy. Restitution is not dischargeable in the bankruptcy, and you're going to be first in line to get paid. So, it never feels good in these situations to talk to an attorney so soon after you've lost a loved one, but I believe it makes a difference. I think it's an important move to make early on.
All right. Let's get into, before we forget, what is the deal with the Halloween party with the Broncos?
So this is fascinating. A few years ago, I mean, the Broncos have been terrible since the Super Bowl. A few years ago, they had an infamous Halloween party. Von Miller throws a big bash. Everybody gets wasted. They're doing. It made TMZ. Emmanuel Sanders had bags of coke. Play coke and on his play cocaine everywhere. Chad Kelly gets hopped up on whatever. He gets in a fight with Von Miller. He gets tuned up. He walks out. His career basically ends because of it. He walks into somebody's townhome, sits on the couch, and somebody wakes up. What are you doing in my house? He ends up getting beat with a vacuum hose. Boom. Chased around the neighborhood with a vacuum hose. Chad Kelly's career is over. Remember the quarterback from Ole Miss? So they said, well, maybe these Halloween parties aren't such a good idea for a while, right? Well, they won 5 games last year. Everything's back to normal. Von Miller says, I think it's a good idea. Let's bring the Halloween party back this year. And of course, that's what we do. We debate it before the year. The year season starts. The ex-athletes on the station say, "Oh, you media types, you idiots! It's not a distraction. Everything's fine. You're making much ado about nothing." And we said, "Okay, yeah, 5-win team. Team's a disaster. Whatever." So they're a train wreck waiting to happen, and apparently, Von Miller says he's cranky. They're losing. And he's, we're talking 6-figure. I mean, this is a blowout. He brings in big rappers, Wagyu steaks, everything. He says, well, guys, I don't want it to be a distraction. I'm not going to have the party unless everybody starts chipping in. And everybody's like, well, you can't just cancel the party. Well, then you guys got to chip in. And it becomes a big brouhaha, becomes kind of a rift. He starts basically shaking teammates down. Some guys don't show up. Some people do. Like Noah Fant, for example, he comes on our station and he's like, well, I'm sorry this came out. Apparently, Noah Fant didn't even show up. Von Miller comes to him, is like, dude, where's your buy-in? He's like, Noah Fant says, well, I don't really want to talk about this, but yeah, I paid. I guess I should have told him I wasn't coming. So yeah, I paid anyway. So it really became, kind of a rift. Von Miller, got paid, because the Broncos are paying him, the rest of his salary for this year, even though they traded him. So I think he had 3 sacks this year for the Broncos. He's getting $18 million. He's shaking down, teammates for his party. Just another great Watkins. I appreciate that. The Broncos are just the I know well, I guess the Raiders now have cornered the market in the AFC West on dysfunction, but at least they're winning still. But the Broncos, a close second, I would say.
I didn't hear anything past Wagyu steaks. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
a party. That's what you need.
Yeah, so this is a good question. How was that kind of a final straw? Did the Broncos say, the guy's a buffoon, let's get him the hell out of here?
No, I think they don't want to admit it. I don't give a lot of credit to George Paton for a lot of things because he leaves me scratching my head. But they got a 2nd and a 3rd round pick for an aging, non-productive. Von Miller hasn't done really anything in 3 years. They got a 2nd and a 3rd round, and I understand they'll come at the back half of the rounds, but they got a 2nd and a 3rd round pick for Von Miller. You do that all day long, as far as I'm concerned. So that's great. You take that. I mean, they're going nowhere this year, and Von Miller was doing nothing for them. He got some sacks early against the Giants and the Jets and the Rams or whatever it was. One of them was on a busted coverage, busted play or whatever. So, Yeah, I mean, his contract was up. Absolutely, you make that deal every day of the week. Like he came out. I don't know if you guys heard this. He came out the week before the Browns. The Browns were decimated. They were starting Case Keenum. They were out like 3 tackles. Like they were on their 4th-string tackle. He said, "I don't even know who's going to be playing for the Browns, but I am going to destroy the Browns. Send in the National Guard, the pit, whatever." And he did nothing for the entire first half. Then he hurt his ankle. And he said, "It's okay. I can come out and play." They said, "Don't bother. Don't even bother. Just sit out." Okay. He's done nothing. And so it's like, yeah, just get rid of him. If we can get something for him, ship him off. He's done here.
Bizarro. All right. So what's going to happen? Is anything going to happen to Aaron Rodgers from the NFL? Can anything happen legally? Dan, I'll let you go first here. This is a bizarre situation. I don't think he ever said he was vaccinated, but he did say he was immunized. And I don't know if the Packers knew what the difference was. Is there any correlation here between the Sharks apparently being confused about Evander Kane's status and a fake vax card? Like, what's going on here?
Well, the Packers had to have known. I mean, they don't just take your word for it. Like he had to provide something. I was arguing with my buddy Andy. We were just arguing over text. He said, "Yeah, were you vaccinated?" He said, "Yeah," and then he qualified, "I've been immunized." And then he did other statements. "I'm not going to judge other people that chose not to. This and that." The question was, "Were you? Have you been vaccinated?" It wasn't, "Have you been immunized?" Everything he did, every answer he's given, was to lead people to believe he's been vaccinated. And the direct question was, "Have you been vaccinated?" "Yeah." And then he continued with his answer, said he's been immunized, and he's also not followed protocols. He will, I assume, I will be shocked if he does not face some sort of punishment from the league for not following the protocols. I don't know what that's going to be, how stiff it's going to be. But yes, he's going to probably face some sort of discipline from the league for not following those protocols, as will the team, because the team, I have no idea how the team just decide, probably because this dude's a nut job and they, if you don't follow my feelings, I'm gonna leave. And he's just a diva, whack job, nut job. In Denver, they were just begging and crying for him to come here. I'm like, why? What makes you think with this, crap coaching staff that we have here, this crap organization from top to bottom here, that he's going to make any difference? That this 5-win team is suddenly going. He couldn't win a Super Bowl with a quality team, with a quality organization, with a NFC Championship game at home when he's having an MVP season. Right? He ain't going to come here and win a Super Bowl, at age 40. Why would you want him here? He's a nut job. And so now I don't understand how the Packers just, said, "Oh, we'll just let you get away with it." They're going to pay some sort of penalty. What it is, I don't know. Now, civil liability, again, it's always about, well, who was harmed? What damages can they prove? I don't. That gets a little murkier. Justin, of course, will have a better answer for that than me. I would imagine. If somebody was truly harmed, could prove some damages, then yes, I guess in theory they could bring something. But he's definitely going to face some league discipline, as will the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, well, not only did the Packers know, but the NFL knew. I mean, we found out that Aaron Rodgers submitted some alternative treatment that he received before the season started and asked for an exemption to be considered a vaccinated player based on this, I don't know, homeopathic medicine or what the hell he's doing. And the league said no. So the league knew he wasn't vaxxed. The team knew he wasn't vaxxed. And then, the team just lets him go out there and lie. I'm sorry. Don't say it's misleading. I'm with Dan 100% here. Are you vaxxed? Yeah. Comma. Whatever comes after that, the lie has already happened. The lie happened at yeah. Yep. But past that, they let him out there lie. They let him violate all the COVID protocol rules. The NFL surprisingly doesn't step in, even though they can see that the COVID protocol is being violated on video in front of them during games and at press conferences. He's going, what the hell is going on?
Now, I just got to jump in here. Like, in the media, I don't know about every market. Like, we're doing what we're told to do and supposed to do to get access.
Mm-hmm.
Are these mother effers just lying to us?
Clearly.
Because here's the thing. I wear the mask a lot, but I would love to know. Like, I'm not in front of Aaron Rodgers, but I'm in front of a lot of athletes. So don't I have the right to know if they're truly vaccinated or not? I mean, I don't get it.
I don't know if you have a right to know, but you have a right to be able to read the rules of the NFL and their protocol.
Right.
Have some protocol rules for yourself and expect
these
that
are the
everybody's
rules
following that protocol.
Right. These are the rules and they're following them. I don't know, man. This whole workplace thing is just so confusing to me. I feel like I did the right thing. I didn't have to get vaccinated. I mean, I kind of did for the UNLV job to travel with the teams, but like I didn't have to get vaccinated. And I feel like in a lot of situations, a lot of us are like, wait, we did what we were supposed to do, and we're the ones who are in the dark. I don't get do we have rights? I don't get it.
I mean, that's where I was going to elaborate on Dan's sort of answer. Is there civil liability? And we talked about this a little on the air from like any teammate or team exec or something like that who were to catch it and be able to say, I got this specifically from Aaron Rodgers. Look at my chronology. It times up. We could even do some testing and verify. And I think the defense to that would very likely be, okay, maybe you did get it from Aaron Rodgers, but the choices you were making in this profession were exposing you every day to thousands of different people. You were playing at NFL stadiums with 60,000 people there. You were at practices with people without masks all the time that you knew some were vaxxed and some were unvaxxed. So I think the causal connection to any sort of future long-term damage, I think, would be speculative. If it was short-term damage, maybe a better argument. But the one that sticks out to me is the media or anybody who doesn't work for the team or work for the NFL, they are being represented the representations are being made to them about their safety in interacting with their team, their players, their league. And so I think top down, if I were a person who contracted COVID and I found out that the protocols were being violated, knowingly being violated, and NFL, Packers, and Rodgers all knew that they were violating this protocol, I think you have a claim. Now,
I'll bring up
what's the damage? What's the damage, right? Like if
right.
you just catch asymptomatic COVID, your damages is zero, but it's not a lot.
What about something as simple as missing out on work and money?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you could make a lost wage claim, but lost wage claims are
how much COVID
limited.
Makes?
Well, that's true.
I will give you. I'll give you an example. If the Raiders were misrepresenting their vax situation, right, and they had players who were unvaxxed, there actually were in this market 2 media people who tested positive last week.
Mm-hmm.
They may have to miss work. They may have to miss time, as we would call it in radio. Maybe they'd have to miss paid remotes. If it turns out that the Raiders were misrepresenting something and they were exposed to a player who wasn't wearing a mask, I mean, again, not to freaking nickel and dime and needle people, but it's just like you started out saying, Justin, you're being presented something as rules and fact, and then behind the scenes, you're finding out there's something nefarious.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, if I'm being a true counselor to a potential plaintiff or a potential claimant that contracted COVID, I mean, what am I going to look at? I'm going to say, okay, how many days of work did you miss? I missed 6 days of work. Okay. And how much do you make per day? I make $500 per day. Okay. I got a $3,000 claim. Tell me about your sickness. I wasn't really sick. I felt chills for one day, and then I just had to sit out the rest because of our rules. But I wasn't sick after the first day. I'm like, okay, now you've got a claim that's worth $3,000 to $5,000. Okay, now what's it worth to you to create this stink and potentially lose out on your access? I don't know how your work works. I require you to tell me how your work works. But if you were to make this claim and you were to make this stand and this stink, is it worth that money for you to do that? And if the answer is yes, cool, let's go. If the answer is, well, I don't think it's worth that, then it's not worth that. My
Well,
job is to simply give you information to make an informed decision.
Well, hold on, Justin. That's not true for most lawyers. Justin, most lawyers would say
Let's go.
our fee is a third, and it's not worth our time.
Oh, there you go.
I no, I disagree with that. I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think I'm the only one that has this opinion. But I'm going to say this: I will take any case, any day of the week that I believe I will break even on, because if there's another person out there in this community that thinks I'm awesome and did an awesome job, and I didn't lose money on that case, it will result in more cases in the future.
You would lose
It's
money on that
marketing
case.
investment.
Yeah,
What's
you're
that?
losing money. You're losing money on that case. Absolutely.
Why? It's a slam dunk. And in Nevada, I mean, I'm sure it's like this in California, I mean, Colorado too, for certain amounts. Any claim that's under $20,000 has mandatory award of attorney's fees and costs if you win.
If you go, if you take a prevail at trial, right, all the way through verdict. Yeah.
Right.
So uh, yeah, a $3,000 to $5,000, a $3,000 to $5,000 case suing the Raiders. That's gonna. Yeah, I don't see how
I would
that's
take
you would lose that.
if the client wanted to do that, I'd take that case every day of the week. I would pump the shit out of it in PR, right? I would be on Cofield's show. I would talk to
I don't know
all
what
the, I would do all that shit. And I would absolutely pump it up. I would not lose money on that case. I guarantee you I would not lose money on that case. And at the end of the day, I would have somebody, if it's a media person who probably talks to a lot of different people, who thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world because I took his case or her case. 100% I'd take that case.
Nice. I don't know, Dan. Your lack of trust in Justin. I don't know what you want. What do you need? You need an attorney.
Well, I will say this in general, taking the media thing out of it. In general,
right?
Most guys that walk through the door saying, "I want to sue my employer," and they go, "It's a $3,000 to $5,000 case. Is it really worth it?" They're not taking it.
Well, you guys, I don't know what your small claims court's like, but I can get that case done in one hearing, right? It's one day.
We can't. You can't have an attorney in small claims here unless the defense has it. Unless the defense has it, and then you can have an attorney.
Oh, yeah. No, we can here. So I could get that case done in one day. Potentially one day.
Yeah. Maybe that's the difference.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm a trailblazer.
I've rolled with you. You're not rolling around doing $3,000 to $5,000 cases all day.
All day long.
All day long. Okay.
I'm not kidding.
We'll
I'm
not
bullshitting for the pod. I'm not bullshitting for the pod.
See, out here, and this is how. Well, this is maybe not a fascinating discussion. Out here, our law practice is thriving because we have we're the anti-TV lawyers.
Yeah.
Because we have the TV lawyers that basically. So here, the policy limits are 25,000, and if their phone rings because they advertise on TV. But if it's not a automatic $25,000 easy slam dunk, liability is not an issue. Minimum $25,000. The insurance company's just going to spit out the policy limits. See ya. We don't want to talk to you. But Jacobs and Long, 303 Law 2020, we want to talk to you. That type thing. So most big firms like Battleborn, if you were out here in Colorado, they wouldn't talk to you, especially not for $3,000 to $5,000.
Short-sighted. That's my take on it.
Yep. But also, you don't have the small claims here. I mean, attorneys can't practice on small claims.
Makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense, but whatever.
All right, good deal. We'll wrap it up tonight.
And we
Dan,
never did get to talk about Alec Baldwin, did we? Or did we talk about it
I
last
know
week?
we never,
Nothing.
we keep missing stories. Do you want to get to it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, good. Well, what are the? I really don't even know the details of the story. I know he wound up. He actually someone died in this case, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, what is the deal here, and how? I guess is this a common thing that there are loaded weapon, like real loaded weapons on TV and movie sets?
Well, typically, yes, it's a real weapon. Typically, how it works is, and remember, Bruce Lee's son died this way. A real weapon that is loaded usually with blanks. And what happened in the case of Bruce Lee's son, and I think that is also what happened in this case, is every once in a while they'll accidentally, and you're saying, how can this happen? Sometimes they get accidentally loaded with live rounds. And in this case, Alec Baldwin was loaded with a weapon and was told, it was shouted out, I guess the term is called cold gun, which is a signal that this gun is loaded with blanks. It's safe ammunition. And so he was practicing for a scene, practicing with the ammunition so he could, look real when he was going to, use the weapon in the scene. And it was live. And a was it a photographer, a cinematographer, choreographer, got shot. And they were everybody else. Most everybody had left. I think it was a break or a lunch break or something like that. And a director, either the director or the producer or something like that, also got hit. Had to go to the hospital, and unfortunately, a young lady died. And so, Alec Baldwin, um, has killed somebody. Somebody had told me, I'm not sure if this is true. It was because it's kind of an independent kind of production. I think it was actually kind of bankrolling the film. He's kind of the money behind the film as well. There was some talk about, some of the set was, or the staff was protesting that the safety wasn't up to par on the set before this.
Yeah, they're non-union, so there's
Yeah.
some discussion and debate about that.
Yeah. So Alec Baldwin is the executive producer, which in those terms, I think in movie terms, an executive producer is, money. That's what it means. So I was an associate producer on a movie one time, which that's what it meant. I gave money. I said I was the associate producer in charge of absolutely nothing. So I was waiting for my Oscar and my SAG card. So I think that's what a lot of producers are. They're just people that have given money to be in the credits. But executive producers, I think, also just give money. So liability wise, it's a good question. I don't know, and maybe Justin knows this, what type of insurance coverage, movies like that have, or what type of exposure an executive producer would have on that.
Oh, definitely. I think from a civil standpoint, there's no doubt about this. I mean, the more interesting question is the criminal standpoint. The debate that's happening and should have happened a long time ago is like, what with the ability we have with computer animation, why in the world are any real guns ever used on a set of a movie anymore? This isn't the first time, and I had read that Brandon Lee wasn't the first time either. There was actually a third time when somebody was shot on set and killed based on a live gun. And
back in the 80s, but that was just because he put it right to his head and blew his head off. It was even with a blank, you can't put it, right to your temple.
Right.
It's still a round of, gunpowder. So yeah, I actually didn't know that until I'd looked it up. Thank you, Wikipedia. But you're right. I mean, it seems kind of unnecessary at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve has a CGI basement on his set right now. Like, do we need real blank weapons?
Yeah. Well, what the crazy part about it is like, so as I understand the timing of this is loaded the rounds, the blanks. They go to lunch. People aren't sure what happens to the gun. It goes somewhere. it had been used earlier, whether that means earlier before lunch or earlier that day for fucking target practice. Like using a set gun like that gun, if you're gonna use it on the set, that gun should just never, ever, ever be loaded with real fucking bullets ever, right? Um, so it was at that point, at earlier that day, either right before or before it was allegedly loaded with blank rounds, had been used for target practice with live rounds.
I hadn't heard that. Like,
And then it's like after lunch, everybody's like, all right, let's pick up where we left off. And it's like, grab, shoot, right? Well, I mean, he was announced cold gun. So the really interesting question, and the DA has not ruled out pressing criminal charges against Alec Baldwin in this. You know, it's super unfortunate, but
good
I'm
luck
just
on
not
that.
there.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
not there on it. Like, what's he supposed to do? You know, I mean, is he supposed to every time start shooting around to see if live bullets come out? I mean, if you have people on set who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and somebody messed up, that's okay. Somebody messed up, but I just don't think Alec Baldwin's the one who should be criminally charged because he happened to be, the person who pulled the trigger at the time.
Yeah. I don't see that being very, I mean, unless there's information that we're simply not privy to, but from what we've heard, I don't see how that would be plausible to be charging him with anything.
Yep.
All right. Good job. We're back tomorrow, actually. First Thursday in a while. Sorry, I've been traveling a bit with the UNLV weekday games and actually for the games. So tomorrow, Coke and I are back at 9 o'clock. We'll go through college football and the NFL. Judge Dan, Justin, appreciate it. And for the listeners who have been sticking with us, even though the schedule's been a little sporadic, appreciate it as well. Like I said,